Meeting is now live.
Thanks, Alan.
Are we good to go, David?
I believe so, yes, Chairman.
In that case, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Audit Board for the 21st of October 2020. It's a virtual meeting, of course. I'd firstly like to welcome our two directors, Mrs. Sarah Martin and Mrs. Sherry Green. Also, Mrs. Marie Kelly-Stone, the Head of Legal Services, Mr. Tim Sands, the Head of Finance, and Fran Chivers, who is our Internal Audit Manager, and also our two outside guests. That's Keith Mungazi and Ian Murray, both from Grant Thornton, who are our external auditors. Can I start the meeting by asking if there's any apologies for absence? I do note at the moment Councillor Harman has not appeared, and he's the only one that's missing.
Yes, that's correct, Chairman. There's no apologies for absence. We're just missing Councillor Harman. Hopefully he'll join us soon.
Thank you very much. Have any members got any declarations of interest to make? No, they have not. Thank you very much. By a show of hands, can you confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July, which was also a virtual meeting? Yes, thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 4, there are no urgent items. Item 5, there are no references from any other committees. We'll move to agenda item 6, the annual report for 2019-2020 of the Monitoring Officer. I believe, Mrs. Curly-Stone, that's yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Just make sure you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Good evening, members. This is our annual report, and as you know, it's been quite a challenging year for governance arrangements in more ways than one. There was a report that went up to committee to GAC last week on the restructure. What this report before you deals with is the 2019-2020 position as it was, and not the current proposal to move to the new directorate restructure. Just a couple of things to point out on the report is that the member code of conduct is subject to national review at the moment. We're still waiting for the results of the consultation. And obviously, once those are through, I will come back to the audit board with any proposals to move forward, if any, on the code of conduct issues. So the report is, as I've said, a standard report that we produce annually on the review of the governance arrangements as well as the constitutional arrangements. And that it is actually a good reference point during the year for officers and members should they need to refer to any specific items of governance or constitution. So I'm happy to take comments, questions, if members have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. I haven't got any questions on it, but I might take this opportunity of thanking all of our officers in all departments for the extra workload they've had to undertake since this pandemic has struck us all. Has any member got any questions on this report from Mrs. Stone? Yes, Councillor Ozog.
Hi, thanks. It's not so much a question, it's just to correct a typo on page 26. The items are live streamed on YouTube.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clearly a gamer amongst us.
Yeah, she's done. I think Julie's just trying to show us all that she read the report thoroughly. Thank you for that. Has any other members got any questions for Marie on this report? I see nobody's indicating. Are you happy to accept the recommendation, members, please? Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for that report, Marie. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is a complaints monitoring and procedure review. which again, I think is yours.
It is, Chairman. Thank you. Again, it's the annual report which we produced for the committee. It's very straightforward, and I'm happy to take any questions if members have any. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I had no questions on this particular report. Any member got any questions of Mrs. Marie Kelly-Stone on this? Looks like it's going to be a very quick meeting. Are you happy to accept the report, members? Thank you. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that, Marie. Moving on to the report from the external auditors. I don't know whether Keith or Ian will be talking to this. Do we know who's going to speak to it?
So it'll be me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian.
Bear with me a moment. So members have in front of them our audit findings report. I think we probably mentioned at the last audit meeting, that audit board meeting, that 2020 has been an unusual year for all sorts of reasons, and unfortunately those have also impacted on the timetable and the production and audit of accounts for this year. So normally we would have had accounts from the council at the end of May, and we would have been looking to sign those off at the end of July. But the statutory timetable has moved, and we now the council had until the end of August to produce accounts, and we have until the end of November to audit those and get those published. So the timetable has been extended. Within that, we've been keen to get on with things, and supported by Mr. Sams and the team, we've been trying to progress the audit as quickly and as efficiently as we possibly can. And we're in a position tonight where we're substantially through the work, but we're not quite yet finished. But we are on track to meet that key deadline of the 30th of November. In terms of key findings on the report, I think this is a relatively clean findings report. There are a number of fairly minor adjustments in terms of presentation, disclosure, and there's one in the appendix. There's one item where we've identified a small potential adjustment which management aren't making, but isn't big enough for us to really worry about. We're just reporting because it's over our trivial error threshold. There is still some work to complete, and there are still some things for us we're waiting for. So in particular, we haven't yet had the assurances we would get from the pension fund auditor around the pension fund as yet. And I think the key message really is that, again, I think we trailed in July, but forgive me if we didn't, is that the coronavirus pandemic has created a degree of uncertainty around, or increased uncertainty around, particularly around valuations for properties and investments at the year end. And that's been reflected that was already reflected in part in the draft financial statements. Since then, there have been some further clarity around that, and that uncertainty is reflected in the accounts, and then will be reflected in our audit report through what's called an emphasis of matter. So this is just where we draw the reader's attention, of the account's attention, to something in the accounts to say this is particularly important when you're reading these accounts, and that's in relation to property valuations, investment properties, and also the pension fund has a number of property investments, property-based investments. So that's nothing that anyone's done wrong, or it's sort of an error or a misstatement. It's just a reflection of the circumstances and the context in which the accounts have been produced, and reflecting events during the first wave of the pandemic at the end of March. The other area of our responsibilities is in relation to the value for money conclusion, and I think the key thing we've done here is just to go back and just revisit the council's plans in light of the pandemic, and I think obviously it's an ever-moving picture, and there's been more money made available by the government in the last few weeks in terms of additional COVID-19 funding, I think it's fair to say, like all businesses, if you go into this situation in a position of strength, it's much easier for you to manage your way through it. And obviously the council came into the pandemic in a strong and financially resilient position, and is therefore, based on what we've seen and based on where we are at the moment, it has been able to kind of to withstand some of the shocks that are impacting more significantly elsewhere in the sector. I wasn't proposing to say very much more, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Well, thank you for that, Ian. I don't have any questions as such, but I am quite welcoming the fact that it's an unqualified opinion. I would like to ask Mr. Samsar, are you happy for me to ask members about signing a letter of representation so that we can forward it to Mr. Murray's team?
Yes, we will need to sign that. Maybe Miss Murray can help in terms of when he actually wants that signed.
So I would prefer that we sign it closer to the date of being able to issue the auditor's report. It's always better if the gap between you signing those representations and us signing the auditor's report is as small as we can make it. And as unfortunately we're not in a position where, again, I don't think the word normal applies anymore, does it? Previously, we would have had this meeting and we'd have been signing pretty much straight away afterwards. We're not quite in that situation this evening, unfortunately. So I think there will be a passage of time between this meeting and us being ready to issue the opinion. So my preference would be that the letter of rep is signed closer to the time of us being able to issue the audit report.
Thank you for that, Ian. I'd just like to say to members, you've heard the dialogue between Mr. Sams and Mr. Murray. Are you happy that when the time comes for me to sign that letter of representation, I'm able to do so?
Right.
Thank you very much indeed. You okay? Has any member got any questions of Mr. Murray on the external auditor's report? Yes, Andy, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. And I appreciate the comments you make about the council came into the pandemic with a strong balance sheet, and so therefore has been perhaps better than others. But I'm not sure whether that's just my my wish and my sort of political belief or the reality. So could you just sort of explain to us how have we fared compared to others, and why is it that I've not seen our leader of the council bleating on the TV every day that they run out of money compared to others? What's been the principal difference, do you think, with Dartford and others? Is it just my perception or is it reality?
I'll let officers come in once I've said my bit. So I think for me there are two or three things. So I think there's the level of reserves. So your kind of the underlying financial resilience that you have a healthy level of reserves. I wouldn't say they're necessarily excessive, but you have a healthy level of reserves, and they allow you to absorb some of those shocks. I think you are maybe you have some income which is at risk, but you're probably less exposed around things like investment income and some of those things than maybe some of your peers would be. So obviously, if you're heavily dependent on other sources of income to prop up the revenue budget from things like investment properties or arm's length arm's length sort of subsidiary companies, those sorts of things, then that exposes you to greater risk in this situation. And I think I get my impression, and I've not worked with the council for very long, but my impression is that that you've had to adjust some of the plans that you're making, but you haven't had to turn things off completely. So you've been able to maintain some of the sort of, for want of a better phrase, business as usual, and some of the things that you've already had in train, you've been able to keep those going. Whereas I think other councils have had more to deal with. It's not to say that there aren't some challenges, and I think we've highlighted those. So I know car parking income, again, that's something which is causing some councils a lot of grief. Leisure is another area where what might normally be an income stream is now a cost, and you will see increase for demand in services as the sort of the full effect of the pandemic, or the after effect, I suppose, of the pandemic in terms of recessions correlate quite strongly with the public needing to rely more on public services, not less. And there will be some risk undoubtedly around things like your council tax receipts and business rates. So some of your revenue is directly linked to the economic prosperity of the country and an area, and those things are going to take a hit, unfortunately. But I think overall, our take was that the position you came in to the year was a relatively strong one. You didn't have a huge ask in terms of savings or a budget gap to plug, and therefore you haven't had to go and find more on top of what you already needed to balance the books, which is probably the key factor. I don't know whether Sarah and Tim are going to agree with me or not, but that's my take.
I appreciate that. It's strong coming from you as an external person that has seen other councils. As I said, I had that perception personally, and I think our team, a fantastic team that they are, would have been feeding me that line. But it's great to have the validation from you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andy. I'm not sure that Tim took your statement of feeding you a line in the manner which was offered. Thank you for that. Ian, has anybody got any further questions of Ian on this? Are you happy to accept the report from the external auditors? And Tim, you note the members have approved me signing a letter at a later stage. I will await an email from you to make arrangements to sign it at some later date.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Ian, for that report. We've moved to agenda item 9, which is the financial statement of accounts. Goodness me, this is your big one, Mr. Sams. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, given the length of the agenda tonight, although I guess we got through some bits quickly, but I wasn't going to spend a long time taking members through a tour of the accounts, you'll be pleased to hear. But it is our team's one moment in the limelight, but I won't hog it particularly. Members are asked in this report to adopt, approve the publication of and authorise to issue the 1920 Statement of Accounts at Appendix A to the report. We've already spoken about how the audit work, there's still some work remaining, and I would hope that work would be completed fairly quickly after here, and it wouldn't drag on to November. That I know we've got the auditors have till November, but as one of the earlier audits, I would expect this audit to be concluded fairly swiftly at this stage. But there is the potential for some other adjustments. So whilst the recommendation asks for members to approve the statement, then I would ask again if the recommendation could be adjusted slightly so that myself and the chairman of the audit board would be given the authorization to agree any changes to the accounts that are picked up as a result of the ongoing audit work, and those changes would be reported back to members of the audit board. So that's just a slight change to the recommendation there. Going forward, the Council Statement of Accounts is prepared in accordance with proper accounting practice, and that's in regard to the accounting rules that are issued by the Financial Reporting Council and the SIPFA Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting. And the accounting rules differ from the statutory regulations that the Council is required to follow regarding setting council tax and in relation to capital finance. So they're not always easy to compare to, say, budget reports that members might have seen that are presented to Cabinet, etc. So the accounts do identify those differences in expenditure and in the treatment of expenditure and funding, and those are identified on page 140 in the expenditure and funding analysis note, and they're also identified in the movement in reserve statement on page 136. You don't need to turn there, but it's just to explain that there's this sort of balance in the accounts between financial reporting and the financial reporting that the council needs to do, and then the statutory basis that we set budgets on and that we report to Cabinet on. So there's always this sort of tension in the accounts, and the accounts do try to grapple with that. But therefore, you may see some elements and some statements and some numbers that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. So it's important to remember, for instance, that those accounting figures shown in the statement are not necessarily usable resources that the council can apply as resources to future demand. So, for instance, if there's a surplus in the income and expenditure statement, not all of that surplus is going to relate to resources that the council can apply. Some of that's going to be unusable gains or accounting gains. There have not been significant changes in the requirements for the year's accounts compared to 18-19, but as already picked up, these accounts were prepared during the national lockdown period, and as such, deadlines were extended, and work to complete the accounts and subsequent audit has taken longer due to homeworking and facilitating urgent elements of the council's response to the crisis. The council wasn't delayed too much in submitting the draft accounts, and these were submitted on the 12th of July. And as already spoken by Ian, the initial work that Grant Thornton has done leads them to expect to issue an unqualified opinion, which obviously we're very pleased about. But they do have a bit of remaining work still to do. So just to summarise the accounts, the main accounting statements are shown in page 135 to 139 of the agenda. There's 4 main statements in local government finance accounts. There's a balance sheet, there's a comprehensive income and expenditure account, which is sort of your equivalent to your profit and loss in the corporate world. There's a cash flow, which is also a corporate statement. And then there's a movement in reserve statement, which is a statement that does try to sort of show what the reserve position of the council is after all these other statements have been taken account of. Overall, the accounts show a positive picture for the council, with an increase in general fund and HRA reserves, and they are consistent with the report to Cabinet that was made in June 2020. I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have in relation to the accounts.
You'll be pleased to know, Tim, I haven't got any questions. I don't know if any members have. Any members got any questions on these accounts? I'm looking especially at Councillor Lloyd. I thought he might have something. Yes.
Chairman, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Actually, I don't have a question. I read them and understand them, which it's taken me many years to be able to come up with that statement. So well done. And I'd just like to pass on my congratulations to Tim and the team. They've done a superb job last year in keeping our finances on track and producing what is a quality set of results. What we heard earlier from Ian at Grant Thornton really was a pat on the back for you, sir. So well done. We have some big challenges ahead. I know we have. I don't think Ian identified all of them. I know that COVID has given us a long tail headache when it comes to finances. So I'm pleased we have that stable background of which to get through to 2021, 22, because we're going to need it, I sense. But well done, and congratulations on producing a brilliant set of accounts.
Thank you for that, Andy. And I echo your comments to Tim. Just a thing for you, Tim, and Sarah. Is it too early yet to make any comments on the external review of public finance accounting and how they're presented? Or should we wait until that review has been digested by most people?
This is in respect to the Redmond review that
Yes.
we were talking about. The Redmond review has, as I was explaining earlier, if you're happy for me just to explore this briefly, as I was explaining earlier, the Redmond review has highlighted that sort of tension I was talking about before, about the statutory nature of the accounts versus the international financial reporting standards, the accounting sort of side of the accounts, and has the review has suggested an additional statement, so just a bit more work for finance teams, but additional statement that with the aim of making it clearer to compare the budget position of the council to the outturn position of the council as presented in the accounts. So there's some detail that's been published on that, and I'm sure SITFA will be looking at that proposal and working out whether or not they're going to put that into the code as the Redmen review has suggested. And yes, practitioners will have an opportunity to advise on whether or not that's a good idea or not as well.
Thank you for that. I dare say it's something that will rear its ugly head in the future. We'll wait and see. Any other members got any questions of Tim on these accounts? Are you happy to accept the recommendation with the proviso that Tim added that it may have to be some slight alterations, but he will talk to me before we sign them off? Are you happy with that? Thank you very much, members. Thank you for that, Tim, and thank your team for the way they do their work. It's very much appreciated by the members.
Thank you.
If we could now move on to agenda item 10, which is the internal audit update report. And I do believe this will probably be our audit manager. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So my report essentially sets out internal audit progress, outcomes and performance since the last report that I presented to you in July. In terms of the progress and outcomes, we have now finished the 2019-20 internal audit plan. All three of those audits that are reported in the Annex B summaries today did receive substantial assurance. So just to assure you that there's nothing in there that would impact on the overall opinion of systems of risk management and governance and control that I gave to you back in July. It is still my opinion that they remain sound for 2019-20. We've made a steady start on the 2020-21 internal audit plan, but bearing in mind that that did only start in July due to the pandemic and because of overruns of 19-20 internal audit work. So 3 pieces of work are complete, and then as at today, I've got another 7 that are in field work, which is slightly more than is reported to you in the written report in front of you, but obviously there is a time delay between me writing those reports and me presenting to you at Audit Board itself. Just to make you aware that in the event of another local or national lockdown, it is likely that some of my team at least might be redeployed to the frontline effort. So we'll keep an eye on it, but at the moment we are very much business as usual. I do have one addition to the plan for members' approval, and that is the home working review that I've mentioned in the update report and in the covering report. That is a piece of work that was requested by management team, simply really in order to allow them to understand any potential impacts on the outcomes and the outputs as a result of the move to home working rather than office-based working. Now, my professional standards really do require that I come to Audit Board for approval before we commence any additional work on the plan. But unfortunately, where these meetings only happen quarterly, if we do that, it simply doesn't allow us to respond in a timely and dynamic way necessarily. So I have discussed that piece of work with the chair outside of the meeting. The chair was happy for us to proceed, and I'm presenting it to you today for retrospective approval. In terms of the 2021 outcomes, we have issued 1 substantial piece of work and 1 limited piece of audit work. Both of these were actually key areas for the council. So the substantial assurance rating, that relates to housing, and then the limited assurance rating, that relates to cyber security. Regarding the cyber security piece of work, that was a piece of work that was done by our specialist IT auditors, Mazars, using a specialist framework. Just to let members know that we've never looked at cybersecurity and internal audit in this way before, so I think probably it is inevitable that there were some learning points to come out of it. But we do have a strong action plan, and I believe that some of those actions have been completed already, so we are making progress to bring that up from a limited assurance piece of work. And then moving on to our performance, I think really the main thing that I've got to report is that we have now procured a supplier for the external quality assessment. Following a procurement process, we have gone with the Institute of Internal Auditors. They're very well placed to do this work, and actually they've offered us a really fantastic review team. We've basically got the leads in the profession, so it's a really fantastic opportunity for us to work with these top professionals in order to improve our service further and drive forward the improvements that we want to make. Realistically, I do think that there will be quite a lot coming out of it, but we're prepared for that, and we just want to work with these people to improve our service and make sure that we're giving you the assurances that we want to be able to give you. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions that members might have, and I just need to plug my phone in as well. There we go.
Thank you for that, Fran. But firstly, on the home working, which we spoke about a while ago, is it your intention to furnish the members with a copy of that review once it's complete?
So I will bring a summary as part of my next report to Audit Board, which will be in January. But members can, of course, request to see a full copy of any audit report that they want to. So I do present you with the summaries within the audit progress report. It's not appropriate for me to put full copies of the audit reports in the public domain, but members can request a copy of any of our audit reports that they want to. And that applies to any audit.
I think the home working report will be quite an interesting one. I can fully understand why management asked for it, because it has quite a number of repercussions for the authority, hasn't it?
It has, and yeah, it has, yeah.
Yeah. And also, when you've mentioned the external assessors, they've already been in touch with me and made an appointment for
excellent.
So I've got a meeting with them in early January.
Yeah.
So they're pretty quick off the mark. Has any member got any questions of Fran on this report? Are you happy to accept the recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that, Fran. Moving on to agenda item now, the counter fraud policies. See, we haven't got Glenn with us, so who's presenting?
Oh, that's me again, Chair.
All yours then.
Okay, thank you. So these counter fraud policies, they haven't been reviewed for about 3.5 years now, so they are really overdue a review. I have quite extensively revised and refreshed these policies in conjunction with the counter fraud manager, but also drawing on best practice from CIPFA, the National Audit Office and other sources. What I've tried to do is keep the basics of the original policies and the kind of principles that were set out in the original policies. But as I said, I've just tried to really refresh and review them so that they're properly in line with best practice guidance and that they set out exactly what it is that the organisation wants to achieve. So I appreciate the whistleblowing policy is quite long, and I apologise for that, but it really does have to be, because it needs to be standalone, both for internal staff and for possible external people that want to whistleblow. We need to try and encourage them to whistleblow, but we also need to give them all the information that they need in order to make that decision for themselves. So it does have to be quite comprehensive and quite detailed, and just give them really all the information that they need to know. In terms of the changes that I've made to the strategy, I think really one of the main things to bring to your attention is that I've tried to place a new emphasis on the role of managers and everybody at the top, really, just to create a culture where there's a strong counter fraud emphasis and where staff really feel able to come forward and raise any concerns without fear of reprisals. And really that culture is one of the most important things that we've got in terms of the fight against fraud. And especially coming from managers and senior directors in the organisation. I think I've said it quite a few times already, but I can go on about counter fraud all I like and how important it is and how I want people to come forward with any concerns that they may have. But if people don't believe that that's the culture of the organisation, we're not going to get any traction and people aren't going to come forward. In terms of the whistleblowing policy, I've also strengthened the role of internal audit so that we now have a more central role, both in terms of oversight of any allegations that come forward, record keeping, and also just making sure that all allegations are investigated fairly and consistently. But in giving that responsibility to internal audit, that does now mean that me and my team cannot provide independent assurance on the adequacy and effectiveness of whistleblowing arrangements in the organisation. So periodically we may wish to get that assurance from a third party, and that could mean buying it in from other audit organisations, or it could mean a peer review. For example, we could approach another local authority within Kent. And then finally, just to bring to members' attention are proposals for International Fraud Awareness Week. This falls between the 15th and the 21st of November, and in conjunction with the Counter Fraud Manager and the Communications Manager, we're planning to roll out some counter fraud awareness, both to the general public via our social media streams, and also to internal staff via some comms on our intranet and via messages from senior managers, which will hopefully help them understand a little bit more about fraud, what it is we do, how we can help them, and what they should do if they have any concerns. But happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you for that, Fran. Yeah, these are, I know it's not a very thick document, but they're very important. Have any members got any questions of Fran on any of these policies? No? Shakes of the head? No? Are you happy to accept the recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that, Fran. We'll move on to agenda item 12, selective invoice checks.
Okay, this is me again. So as you're all aware, this isn't really a standard agenda item. It's something that we do at every audit board. In this instance, the chair selected 5 invoices and my team have then gone away and looked at the payments that we've made. As you'll see from the report, 4 of the 5 payments we found were okay, they were fine, they'd been made in accordance with our financial regulations. But the 5th one wasn't quite as we'd expected. And essentially the issue with that 5th one was that the procuring manager had kind of procured each individual item from that supplier as if it was a single invoice and a single payment. But actual fact, if you consider the cumulative spend that we'd made with that supplier over a few years, we're breaching financial regulations in that we should have gone to a more competitive route to market, as it were. There's nothing intentional on the part of that manager. It was simply lack of awareness, really. And so the chair and I have discussed prior to this meeting that we do need to do a little bit more education for staff just to make them aware of what these routes to market are and exactly what it is that they should be doing in particular situations. And it's really hard with cumulative spend because often people do forget that actually it's not just that one invoice or that one particular service that you're buying. It's how much have you spent with them and how much are you likely to spend with them? And that's actually quite hard to gauge. So Tim and I will be discussing after the meeting how we can best promote those messages throughout the organisation. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Fran. Just to touch on, I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Lloyd. Just to touch on what Fran said at the start, because these meetings are virtual, it's not possible to circulate a list of payments that have been made by this authority. So I deal with that with Fran sends them to me, and I've selected 5 on your behalf, and that's what we'll continue to do whilst the meetings are virtual. Yes, Councillor Lloyd, you had a question.
Yes, and well done for picking 5, of which one of them become tricky. It's always our job, isn't it, when we pick them? So congratulations, David. It's a question really for Tim. Tim, our accounting system clearly would have a record of each supplier and how much we spend with them. Is that something where you could actually do a review now of total supplier spend for the period and ensure that we haven't got any other cases like this, which have accidentally slipped through the net but clearly need dealing with? Is that something you're thinking about?
It's something we do. We do it periodically. I don't think we've done one that's gone back 3 years before. So this was over the 3 years. So I think that's why it wasn't picked up in those exercises. But yes, it is something that we've done sort of a year's worth of analysis in the past. So that's something, again, I've spoken to the Senior Finance Procurement Officer about how we could improve that process to pick up more of these kind of situations.
Okay, so you're alive to it. Sorry, I'm teaching you to suck eggs, aren't I?
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, members? No? You happy to accept this report? Thank you. That concludes the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance. I'd like to thank Mr. David Hook for hosting this meeting today. Thank you, David. And thank you all for your attendance. And I'll see you virtually or whatever soon. Thank you very much.